The war was burning across Europe like a storm without end, and in the middle of this chaos stood a young German officer whose story would one day become one of the most jaw-dropping untold tales of the Second World War. His name was Wilhelm Hartmann, and though history almost erased him, the fragments that remain reveal a man who walked a razor-thin line between duty, honor, loyalty, and the terrifying moral darkness that surrounded him on all sides. His journey began long before the thunder of artillery and the roar of engines dominated the continent. It began in a quiet village deep in the heart of Germany, where the ideals of family tradition and strict discipline shaped his early years. Wilhelm was raised in a household where obedience was praised above all else. His father was a veteran of the Great War, a man wounded both in body and spirit, and he believed that the only path to restoring German pride was through unwavering service. Wilhelm grew up listening to the old battlefield stories, not stories of glory but of loss, suffering, and disillusionment, yet those tales planted a seed within him, a belief that he must one day serve something greater than himself. When Wilhelm reached adulthood, he found his country in turmoil, a nation broken by economic collapse, political violence, and deep humiliation. The rise of the new regime promised many things: strength, order, unity, and for Wilhelm these promises felt like a call. He joined the army not out of hatred, not out of fanatic loyalty, but because he believed that he could help rebuild a fallen nation. He entered the officer academy with a sense of purpose. The training was brutal, grueling, and unrelenting. Every moment was designed to break weakness and forge absolute discipline. Wilhelm excelled. He was calm, focused, intelligent, and capable of earning the respect of both his peers and superiors, but deep within him, he carried something dangerous. He had a conscience, a moral compass that refused to die even as the world grew darker. His story truly began when he was assigned to a frontline infantry regiment on the Eastern Front, a place where the brutality of war revealed itself in its most horrifying form. The bitter cold, the endless forests, the sudden ambushes, the terrifying silence before mortars rained fire, all these became a part of his daily existence. The Eastern Front was not just a battlefield, it was a world consumed by destruction and suffering, and no officer, no matter how skilled or brave, could escape the psychological scars it carved into the mind. Wilhelm witnessed horrors that no training could prepare him for: villages burned, families scattered, soldiers broken by fear and exhaustion, comrades frozen in the snow because supplies failed to arrive. The cruelty of winter was often deadlier than the enemy, yet through all this Wilhelm kept his men alive. He led not with cruelty, but with compassion. He refused to sacrifice soldiers for meaningless objectives. He treated civilians with respect when others did not. He quietly sabotaged brutal orders when his conscience demanded it, and because of this his men trusted him deeply. His reputation began to spread. He was the officer who cared, the officer who listened, the officer who risked punishment to protect his unit. But in war, doing what is right can be the most dangerous thing of all. One day, during a chaotic retreat, a young Russian woman and her child fled into the path of Wilhelm's unit. They were terrified, shivering, hungry, and moments away from being mistaken for spies by another patrol. Wilhelm stepped forward, shielding them from danger. He knew the regulations. He knew that civilians near military operations were considered threats, but something in his heart refused to let them die. He ordered his men to help them, give them food, let them rest, and guide them to safety. This act of humanity would change everything. A report reached division headquarters. A superior officer, furious at the breach of protocol, accused Wilhelm of disobedience and aiding the enemy. An investigation was launched. The consequences were severe. He could be court-martialed, imprisoned, even executed. But something unexpected happened. Wilhelm's men stood together. They defended him fiercely, stating that he had acted not out of betrayal, but out of honor. Their loyalty moved even the hardened investigators. And instead of punishment, Wilhelm was quietly reassigned to a new role as a liaison and field strategist in a different sector, a move meant to remove him from danger. And from attention, this reassignment marked the second phase of his unbelievable journey. Wilhelm now found himself working closely with officers who operated behind front lines, analyzing movements, coordinating defenses, and planning retreats as the war turned against Germany. He saw firsthand how desperate the situation had become. Factories could not keep up with losses, supplies were dwindling, morale was broken, leaders still clung to the illusion of victory, and millions of young soldiers were being sacrificed for goals that no longer made sense. Wilhelm tried to make a difference. He wrote reports warning of the unfolding catastrophe. He urged commanders to pull back, reorganize, and protect the surviving troops. His reports were clear, honest, and strategically sound, but honesty was not welcome. The higher authorities dismissed him, claiming he lacked loyalty and truth. They feared that admitting weakness would collapse the fragile morale of the nation. As the war neared its final years, Wilhelm made a decision that would define his legacy. He secretly began helping groups of civilians escape the devastation. German families caught between advancing armies, Russian prisoners, and forced laborers who had been abandoned all found unexpected protection through his careful planning. He falsified documents, delayed withdrawals, redirected supply wagons, and manipulated communications, all to shield innocent lives from being crushed between the weapons of two empires. Each time he helped someone escape, he risked everything, yet he continued because he believed that even in a world consumed by darkness, a single act of humanity could still shine like a spark of hope. There was one moment in particular that later became legendary. During the collapse of a major defensive line, Wilhelm's unit became surrounded. A brutal blizzard raged around them, and enemy forces were closing in. Thousands of soldiers faced annihilation. Cut off from reinforcements and supplies, commanders ordered them to hold the position at all costs, but Wilhelm understood the truth. Staying meant certain death. He made a bold decision. He ignored the impossible order and instead planned a daring escape through a narrow mountain pass, a route considered too dangerous to attempt even in good weather. His men trusted him without question. They followed him into the storm. When enemy scouts spotted them, Wilhelm personally led a small diversion team, drawing fire onto himself to protect the retreating soldiers. For hours he navigated the blinding snow, guiding his men through cliffs and frozen rivers until they emerged on the other side alive, battered but free. Nearly every soldier survived because of his leadership. It was a miracle born from courage, ingenuity, and self-sacrifice. His deeds spread quietly, whispered among exhausted troops. Many believed he was marked for something greater, but history does not always reward the brave. The war eventually collapsed. The Reich fell. The world changed forever. Wilhelm surrendered his unit peacefully, preventing unnecessary bloodshed. He was taken into custody and interrogated like many others, but testimonies from civilians, prisoners, and rescued soldiers painted him not as a villain, but as a man who remained human in the most inhuman of times. After months of investigation, he was released and allowed to rebuild his life in silence, refusing fame, recognition, or military honors. He simply wanted peace, a quiet life, a chance to leave the nightmare behind. In the years that followed, Wilhelm rarely spoke of the war, but those who knew him said that he carried a weight in his eyes, a knowledge of horrors that could never fully fade. He became a teacher, guiding young minds away from the path of blind obedience, helping them understand the importance of conscience, courage, and compassion. His story remained hidden for decades, buried under the rubble of history, until fragments were uncovered, revealing a man who defied orders to save lives, protected the weak, and remained a beacon of humanity in a world that had forgotten its meaning. The jaw-dropping part of Wilhelm's story is not that he was a hero in the traditional sense. It is that in a time when cruelty was praised and mercy was forbidden, he chose to be human. He chose to think. He chose to act. He chose to protect. And that simple choice changed countless lives. His legacy reminds us that even in the darkest moments, even when the world seems lost, even when obedience is demanded and fear controls everything, one person with a conscience can still stand against the storm and reshape history in ways that may never be fully known or understood. His tale endures because it asks a question that every generation must face when the world goes dark. Will you follow the shadows or will you search for the light? Wilhelm Hartmann chose the light,